and I say this affectionately, our favorite data guru nerd, Ryan Girdusky, who has been on with us a lot, breaking down all of the numbers out there. He is now a part of the Clay and Buck Podcast Network. He's going to be doing a weekly show diving into numbers that he thinks are important. You've got a great podcast up about redistricting and how many actual, and I was reading about it as well, how many different congressional seats are actually up for grabs. But I wanted to start with you about a numbers game that I think is going to be really significant. And that is when the next census comes down, we're going to see a real reallocation of electoral college votes that is going to overwhelmingly favor red states that voted Trump. May not be an application in full force in 28, but by 32, this is seismic. What should people know about where we're headed as that census recalibrates the population?
Hey, thanks for having me on. Yeah. I mean, the biggest hot take is that by 2032, a Republican or a Democrat, either which one, can win but more than likely a Republican, can win the presidency without winning a single Rust Belt state. Aside from Ohio, they don't need Pennsylvania, Michigan, or Wisconsin anymore. The entire Rust Belt is taken out of the equation because Michigan and Pennsylvania more likely are going to lose one congressional seat. California will lose 3, 4, or 5, depending on whose estimate you're looking at, while Florida and Texas and North Carolina are set to gain, and Georgia as well set to gain. And that alone will make it possible to win the presidency without having to compete in the Rust Belt. And it will change our politics, quite a bit. It may end up becoming where our politics are a lot less populist than they were. A lot of economic populism comes out of the Rust Belt. But it may create a solid conservative majority for the presidency going into the next decade if they can hold Georgia and North Carolina, which are the two big questions. If they lose Georgia, they have to win just one Rust Belt state then. But it becomes a lot more difficult for Democrats. They basically would have to make North Carolina more competitive, turn Georgia back blue, and they did a horrendous – I mean, they got a beating in Arizona. So they'd have to make Arizona competitive again, and Nevada. They'd have to run the gamut and make more states competitive, considering they've written off Florida. Texas is not what they thought it was going to be, the perpetual belief that Texas would be a blue state one day. And as people continually flee Oregon, Washington, New York, California, New Jersey, these big blue states, these heavily taxed, overly regulated states for the South, for the Midwest, and the prairie states, it makes it a lot more difficult for Democrats in the next decade.
How have the numbers continue to play out, Ryan, on those migrations, if you will, from the blue states? I mean, I think that we saw a lot during COVID. We all know that. I moved to Florida. A lot of people left California, New York, went to Florida, Texas, Tennessee, a handful of other states. But the post-COVID migration seems to be a reality that continues on. And is this putting any pressure on some states to actually do something to stop the outflow? It just feels like at some point, how can New York shore up its budget and pay $14 billion for illegals and all the other things that it's doing if a lot of top earners are deciding they want to live in Texas?
Well, that's two different questions. One, how do they pay for it? New York has had that problem forever. I mean, New York, when I worked for the state Senate back in 2009, I think it was a third of the budget came from Wall Street bonuses. So if like NASDAQ moved to Florida or the Dow Jones moved to Tennessee or Texas or whatever, New York State would be like Illinois, which can't afford to pay lottery winners sometimes because they're so behind on their budget. But the question on the congressional reapportionment, what they're looking for is what you're seeing out of California right now. They're in a special session, not for the fires, but to protect their illegal population. Mass immigration and mass illegal immigration and luring people to blue states, especially, let's say, Trump and Tom Homan, border czar Tom Homan, decided to do their mass deportation efforts, and blue states say, no, come here, we'll protect you, you won't be deported. And that lures some people from Florida or North Carolina or Georgia to New York and New Jersey. That's what saves their congressional reapportionment. That's what saves their electoral college. Without the illegal alien population, and had we had the same immigration numbers that we had in 1998, which is a long time ago now, but it doesn't feel like that long a time ago. California would be down 4 or 5 seats. New York would be down 2 or 3 seats. Ohio would have more seats. Red states in the Midwest would have more seats, like Indiana. And Texas may have fewer, but it wouldn't be that much more considering how much other blue states would lose. So that's what they're going to be looking for. They're going to be saying, hey, we need to continue legal immigration because a lot of legal immigrants, because they have family and associations, go to blue states, and there's a lot of welfare programs for their children and schools and whatnot. And illegal aliens will sit there and go there to be protected from mass deportation. That's their only way of decreasing their population losses. And what you saw from 2021's estimate to 2025's estimate is that the number of seats that blue states are going to lose has actually gone down post-COVID, in great part because of immigration, both legal and illegal.
Ryan, one of my favorite lessons so far that I have seen from the 2024 election from a positive perspective is that it was actually the least racially polarized election that we've had since 1964. That is all the way back 60 years. In the life of many of our listeners right now, entire voting life, there has never been a less racially polarized election. Do you think that is a symptom of something that is likely to continue to evolve? Or would you say Trump is a unicorn in the way that he had so much appeal to Black, Hispanic, and Asian voters? How much of this is Trump? How much of this is a larger realignment going on with the political parties that Trump is benefiting from?
It's funny on it's a numbers game, not this upcoming week, which is on immigration from an administrative perspective, but on the following week, we're going to have on Patrick Ruffini from Echelon Insights to talk about this very thing. Part of it is definitely because Trump is not a classical Republican, right? He has never been he never talked very heavily about slashing budgets, and he's very populist on economic issues. Slashing spendings to balance budgets. He's not, your George H.W. Bush Republican, and that has large appeals to people who are former Democrats, and also Democrats becoming high on their supply of, white liberal women and also Black women, and defending things like mass criminality that comes heavily out of the Black community and other things that turned away a lot of Asians and Hispanics who said, I'm not about this, and a lot of Black Americans who also don't like any of that stuff, especially Black men who, they're legal, they're regular law-abiding citizens, and they don't like that either. All trends are going one direction until they're not anymore. So we'll have to sit there and see. Ultimately, when you're talking about building an electoral mandate, right, from a Republican perspective, the batter is the white working class. That's if you're making a cake, the main source of what you're making is from the white working class. Everything after that is the cream filling and the icing and the cherry on top. That it definitely helped in some states. How much does it continue? I don't know. A portion of the realignment came from conservative people who are minorities who maybe they were pro-life, or they loved guns, or they wanted small taxes, but they were just ancestrally Democrat, and they made their first crossover. And they may continue being Republicans for the rest of their lives. They could also switch if the Republican Party then switches back to sit there and say, you know what, this Trump experiment for the last decade was fun. Let's get back to, the politics of George W. Bush. And they say, well, this is not really what we're about anymore. I think Trump opened the door for a lot of it. It just is a question if the Republican Party chooses to continue walking through the door. Some Republicans, like Senator Jim Banks, for example, and other ones definitely want to continue that momentum. J.D. Vance wants to continue that momentum. Other of them would love to shut that door and go back to the tried and true beliefs that they had maybe 40 years ago, because they haven't flipped the calendar in a long time and don't realize what the year is anymore.
Speaking of Ryan Girdusky, It's a Numbers Game is his podcast in the Clay and Buck Network. First episode out this week. He's got another one coming out Monday. To that end, Ryan, on the immigration side of things, what are you tackling in the podcast? And just as a additional question to throw at you, do you think that there's more support for the mass deportations than the Democrat corporate media is ready for?
Well, definitely. You're seeing it with the Lake and Riley Act, where, I think it was 80 plus members, including a ton of Democrats, joined in hand. And basically any Democrat in a tough district, a few of them sat there and voted against it, but almost every House member in a tough district voted for the Lake and Riley Act. I think they're sitting there and saying, wow, defending criminality is very, very, very bad for us. I have on Theo Wold as my guest. Theo Wold is the Solicitor General from the state of Idaho, and he worked for both Jared Kushner and Stephen Miller in the first Trump administration. So we go over, there's the data that I want everyone to come across with is there's 2.4 million new immigrants per year under the Biden administration, the most in our history. So Theo goes over what can the administration do by itself? What does it need Congress to do? And what really can we expect from a Trump 2.0 term? What can we sit there and say that they can do unilaterally, regardless if Republicans and Democrats kick and drag their feet and the corporate media and the donors sit there and kick and drag their feet? If he has the will, what is the way to sit there and really change our immigration?
Last question for you, Ryan. We saw Nevada go red. And I know it's gone red before, but it's been a while. California and New York both moved massively red. All 50 states moved red, and it actually got close in New Jersey and Virginia. Early, I know we just finished an election, but the next elections to take place, governorships in New Jersey and Virginia. How competitive do you think those will be? Do you buy into the idea that New Jersey or Virginia could be in play, not only for the governorships, but as potential flippable states as 2028 moves into the next cycle?
Well, Virginia has a great nominee for the Republican and Democratic side. So Virginia will be very, very, very tough. Winston Sears, the lieutenant governor, is running. Governor Glenn Youngkin is super popular, outgoing. So who knows? But Virginia is definitely starting off as a toss-up place. I'll say a good piece of data for you about New Jersey. In 2019, Democrats had about a 1 million voter registered advantage in New Jersey than Republicans did, about 1 million more Democrats than Republicans. It's under 800,000 or about 800,000 now. Republicans have out-registered them every month continually for over 3 years. Now it's 6,000 a month, 5,000 a month, but over time that matters. That goes in one direction, and it's continuous. And could it happen? It'll be a tough fight, but it's not impossible in New Jersey. This is the third straight election we've seen New Jersey get closer and closer and closer. It is a trend. It is not a fluke. The governor's race wasn't a fluke. The state legislative race the year before that wasn't a fluke, and this presidency is not a fluke. And they need to wake up to that. Just like in New York City, we've seen trends moving to the right. And the crazy thing is, it's happening organically because there is no real super effort on the part of the GOP to flip these states and these areas. This is happening because people are looking around saying what's going on is not working.
Ryan Girdusky, everybody. Go check out It's a Numbers Game coming out on Monday. It's already doing great numbers. Thanks to all of you downloading it and listening. Ryan, we'll talk to you soon. Congrats on the podcast launch and the success of the first episode.
Thank you.
All right, Buck, I gave you picks yesterday. PrizePicks.com. Use my name, Clay. You get $50 when you play $5. NFL playoffs are coming up. I told you that Buck's favorite player, George Pickens, was going to go more on receiving yards. I said that Jalen Hurts was going to score a touchdown. I gave you those picks, gave you 4 of them, and said this is going to end up with a win. Jordan Jefferson touchdown for the Minnesota Vikings, star wide receiver there. And I also gave you one other. I don't have it in front of me right now, but we will tweet it out. Gave it out to you on Thursday, giving it out to you again on Friday because the games are taking place on Saturday, on Sunday, and on Monday. You can go. It's super easy to use. It's fun. You can play in California, Georgia, Texas. If you're feeling left out, trust me, go sign up. It's super easy to use, very intuitive, lots of fun. If you like football like I do, prizepicks.com. My name, Clay. You get $50. Prizepicks.com. My name, Clay.